Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group. And with me as always is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Doing great. How about you, Eric?
Absolutely fantastic.
All set for Valentine's Day? Going to take care of your wife?
Of course.
Okay. Hope you are listening, ladies.
Yes. You know, it's funny. There was just a study came out. The average man spends $360 for Valentine's Day. The average woman spends $65. So, I think we're getting the short end of the stick here.
I think so, too, although I don't even come close to spending that. But, she does get a card.
There you go.
And a dinner, so.
Oh, of course, dinner. You can't do it without dinner. All right, so over the past weeks, we've been talking about building a business. We've talked about business plans, marketing plans. But that's not for everybody who wants to run a business. Some people want a turnkey solution that they can step into and have these plans that they can follow. Well, that's where franchising comes in. So today we're going to talk about franchising, and we've brought on Steve Rosenkrantz from the Entrepreneur Source, who's an expert in franchising. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great, thanks. Thanks for inviting me on the show.
Thanks for coming. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I grew up as an entrepreneur. Not that I'm that smart, but I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So that's all I've ever known. And I grew up in a family business that had a chain of True Value hardware home centers and paint and wallpaper stores. And we even had baby furniture stores and auto supply stores, et cetera. A few hundred employees. And that was my life for many, many years. And I never thought there'd be a plan B. But we saw that retail was changing, the marketplace was changing, and this is way back in 2000, 2001, and we made some tough decisions, and turned out to be very good decisions to kind of move on in different directions. And here I was at a career crossroads that was never planned. And I went on the internet, and I was discovered by a company called the Entrepreneur Source, and I had my own personal coach, and it was free. There was no cost, no obligation. I thought that was amazing, and I rediscovered myself through my franchise business coach, and I loved what he did so much. I said, I think I want to do what you're doing, Barry. And he says, well, the Entrepreneur Source, we are a franchise that helps people find the right franchise, and I think you might be a great candidate for this type of business. And I invested in that business in 2001, and here I am 18 years later, assisting hundreds of people across the country who are entrepreneurially curious.
That's fantastic. Now, you mentioned, you had True Value hardware franchises and Entrepreneur Source as a franchise. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what a franchise actually is? Because I know there's a lot of people, they hear franchise, they think fast food and not much else.
Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. And I'll be honest, when I did my study initially, before I got into all this, having only grown up in an independent business, startup type business, I really didn't know what a franchise was either. I just knew that it did span into different industries, and so I had to be educated. But basically, franchising is a whole array of industries. And exactly when I say I'm a franchise, I get a lot of crazy looks like, wait a second, Steve, you're not flipping burgers. You have no employees. You have no store. How are you a franchise? Which is exactly my point. Franchising takes on all shapes and sizes. If somebody wants something full-time, part-time, semi-absentee, where they manage the manager, maybe keep their job, all of those things can be in play, and they span over every type of industry you can imagine. We do a lot with service-based businesses that perform some type of service or offer products to the business world or to homeowners. That's very popular. And then we have the classic storefront type businesses, the Maaco, Amcos, Meinekes of the world, and everything in between. So the other thing a lot of people don't realize is franchises could start as low as $30,000 investment, and they can go up to millions of dollars and everything in between. So I particularly like the consultative business to business type franchises that are out there that we work with several that people could work from a home-based home office environment, and they don't need any employees, and they can really be the face of the business and have the work-life balance that they so crave. So that's my job, is to kind of be an educator and a matchmaker, because there is such a wide array of franchises. And I probably, Eric, only do about maybe 10 to 15% of all the people I've helped place in the right franchise over the 18 years have actually been in the food related area. And so although it's still an important part, it's actually a much smaller part in when you look at the array of industries available.
Yeah, and Eric and I have talked a lot about business structure and that kind of thing. One of our favorite books that we talk about is the E-Myth Revisited, and it starts out, E stands for entrepreneur, and statistically, the way that the book works is the entrepreneur is the visionary, but there's two other types of people. There's a manager who runs the entrepreneur systems and is driven up a tree when the entrepreneur changes something. But most people out there are technicians, and they're the people who are doing all the work. And they say the entrepreneur is making all the money. I know this business, therefore I know the work, therefore I know the business. And invariably, they're the ones that start the new businesses, and most of them are gone within 5 years. Whereas if you buy a franchise, you have a 95% or more chance of succeeding, because you get all the how-tos and the whole business model is done for you. So, we talk about organization charts and operations manuals and going from infancy to maturity and whatever. And when you're buying a franchise, you're buying a mature business, and that's what you're paying to do. But you have a great opportunity to succeed there. So that's one of the really, really neat things out there for you folks who are thinking about franchises, is most of what you are talking about, Steve, is really highly successful business model that they literally can walk into in whatever way they want to do that, because you're going to coach them through the process.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Matter of fact, we use the line, be in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And that really speaks volumes towards what the right franchise can do. And Chip, I would go one step further and say, it's not a matter of if somebody's entrepreneurially curious, whether they should start their own business, should they buy an existing business, should they consider franchising. Where my vantage point is, they should have all those ideas in play. As long as there's entrepreneurial curiosity, I always say there's no downside to work with a franchise coach like myself, because it's great to learn about franchising. As I tell people, if you're not going to be the franchise, your competitor will be. And it's always good to play in the sandbox in a nice way and respect the competition, but understand the competition. So the education I offer is valuable for those that don't even go the franchise route.
Yeah, and I've known your organization for a long, long time, but one thing I learned only by meeting you a couple of years ago is that you actually help existing businesses franchise themselves. So if you could talk a little bit about that, I think that that's a fantastic feature that you have. And obviously a lot of it is coaching. So when you're working with people who are in the market for a business, whether they're looking for a franchise or not, I'm sure that's a big value added in talking with you about this in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people who are curious and open to see what type of business might be well suited, they might be well suited for, and vice versa. What I'll throw out there, because you had mentioned the E-Myth Worldwide, which is a wonderful portal of franchise and business related education. My company actually has an educational program, an entrepreneurial educational program called AIM for Success. And any of the listeners, if they ever want to contact me, just mention AIM for Success. We subsidize it 100%. There's literally no cost whatsoever. And it's kind of a self-paced learning modules. But it's wonderful, Chip, for people who've never owned a business before, really just thought about dipping their toe in the entrepreneurial waters, but they're not sure. That's a person who can really benefit from this self-paced learning program called AIM for Success, and really touches on that Michael Gerber book you were mentioning. That's kind of the benchmark of our whole program. Now, as far as franchising a business, you mentioned that. That's what we call our franchise development arm of our business. totally separate from matching people to existing franchises, but I'm very active in that space as well. A good example is a company out in Boston, started with just one unit called Extra Innings. And someone saw on the back of my business card several years ago, it says, "Have you ever considered franchising your business?" One little line, but someone picked up on it. And next thing you know, I'm bringing my kids for batting practice and looking at the pitching mound and going into the baseball pro shop and such. And today there's 27 open or under development across the country. So it can start sometimes with just a thought and gathering information about, hey, is my independent business franchisable? And if so, what are the things you need to think about? There's so many things beyond just doing a manual, hiring an attorney and saying, okay, I'm a franchise. And then you got to think of, do you have something unique in the marketplace that you'll be able to market to get your new franchisees on board? So we kind of help with all that, and we team up with very successful businesses that are prime and known across the country in the franchise development space. So I'm kind of the front end of all that. So anytime people see something, they say, boy, this is so cool, but it's only regional. It's just local. But man, I could see this out in Vegas or California or Canada or wherever. I always like to hear about those types of businesses, and we could find out rather quickly whether they might in fact be franchisable.
Right, so, Steven, for somebody who's just starting out in business and they're not sure if they want to start their own or they want to go into a franchise, what are some of the pros and cons of getting a franchise compared to starting from scratch?
Yeah, it's a great question. Of course, I'm asked that all the time. And so I would say this. For me, keep in mind, I grew up in an independent business. That's what I did most of my life. And now in the last 18 years, I've been on the franchise side since we are a franchise ourselves, the Entrepreneur Source. I'm able to see firsthand the real differences. And here's what I would say, although I'll never say it's 100%, nothing's ever 100%, but my observation in general is people who start their own business from scratch and run that business, most of them, a vast majority of them, have trouble with the work-life balance element. The business becomes them. It consumes them. It's their every thought. It's their every. I once had a friend who I was up on the chairlift with him, and he pulls out the little recorder, and he couldn't stop even for a moment to just enjoy the scenery and know that he was not working right now, but the business was just so immersed in his thoughts. I find with myself being a franchise owner and with many of the people I've put into franchises, because there's things happening even when you're not actively working, whether it's help in the lead generation, marketing, a lot on the technology front. Today, technology moves so quickly. Franchising's right on the pulse of helping people be right on top of that learning curve. It is so hard to do by yourself. You have to be a genius, and you have to have very deep pockets to do all that independently. So really being able to tap into all those franchise resources in training, support, etc., that to me I found leads to an easier work-life balance, because life's too short. And when you miss your 5-year-old daughter's piano recital, it may not seem like a big deal at the time, but man, you think about that once a year for years and years and years. And as a franchise owner, I can honestly tell you, and I tell people this, in my 18 years in franchising, I've never said the word no once knowingly. What does that mean? If someone said to me, can you do this? And it's something personal, something to do with friends, something to do with relatives, that will always take precedence over business. And I'm in a position to always make that precedent. And if I own my own independent business, sometimes it sounds good to say yes, but it's not always possible. Is that helpful?
Yes, it is.
Great.
So,
yeah. Obviously,
in general, go ahead, Chip.
Yeah, obviously, it's got to be the right thing to do. So I'm sure a lot of your process is